Tonight we are discussing chapters 14 through 19. So if you've read ahead, please try not to blurt out any spoilers for the rest of us. So we're about, I guess this kind of marks the halfway point. These pages, halfway, we're about a middle point through the book. And we are really in to the college years here, the wonder years here. Does anyone want to start off with their interpretation or maybe even their experience of applying for college or remembering going to college like during these years and these pages that the author is referring to? Does anyone want to share anything before we kind of dive into the book about their own kind of personal college
again, one main thing that stood out to me again personally, I went to a Catholic parochial school system also, okay? And I remember they were not interested in us going to a secular college. They wanted to keep you in, like she says, everybody look at the beginning of the 14th chapter, page 147. I told her that I wasn't interested in parochial colleges. I wanted to apply to Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Columbia, Stanford. She looked at me, okay, and that was the extent of her guidance, okay? When I said no to Fordham, she offered the names of several more Catholic colleges. And I thought that was interesting because I have seen that happen many times. At a Catholic high school that served the kids of Irish and Italian immigrants, a focus on parochial colleges made perfect sense. And I saw a lot of that happening. I had experienced that, okay? They were not gonna gear you to even a historically Black college, okay? That they were not gonna talk to you about Howard or Tuskegee University, okay? They wanted to gear you to the Irish Italian Catholic college system. And if a person was not interested in that, in the Catholic school system, you weren't gonna get any more guidance. And I found that very interesting of her bringing that in her book.
Thank you. Wow, yeah.
Can I add to that, if I may, to go even younger? When I was graduating middle school, and I graduated just like you did from St. Simon Stock School, middle school, the nuns, they had no interest in guiding me towards a public high school. They wanted me to go to Aquinas or to St. Catherine's or, you know, some Catholic school. Even though I did end up going to Catholic school, but they had no interest in trying to show me anything outside of that. So my teacher was the one who actually had to guide me into the public school system, into a good one, you know, to try to get me into one of the better ones for high school, because they would not help me in that area at all. Yeah. And then when it came to looking for college, no one had gone to college in my family. So I worked before I even decided to go to college. I worked as an administrative assistant downtown for 2 years. I was going on 20 when I finally decided, 19, when I decided to study for the SAT on my own and start applying for different colleges. And I had no idea what to do. I just, you know, did what I thought I should do. I went to the library and got applications and things like that. And because, you know, no one had ever applied, so nobody could really direct me. So.
Do you remember there was SAT courses that taught you how to apply for college? And
yep.
They were special. Yeah, I took several of those and my children too. Really helpful.
Yeah, that was the only thing that did help me. Because of that, I was able to get a scholarship.
Yeah.
The guidance counselors in public, so I went to a public high school that weren't that much better. I basically did everything myself. As far as visiting colleges, I could totally, identify with her experience. It's not like it is now where the whole family goes to see the college. It's like I got on a train and went to Boston and got off and tried to see as many colleges in one day as I could because, there was only that money for that one Amtrak ticket. There were groups, Syracuse University, actually, their Black Student Union gathered a couple dozen kids from the inner city and took them up for a weekend. But other than that, I was on my own. But it's totally changed from what it was. And SAT prep, that was what you did yourself, like she did with the practice test. There was no going to the Princeton Review or whatever is out now.
Yeah, I'm a product of affirmative action, which stood out at the end of I think in the last chapter, they really pronounced affirmative action. And, that's where Sotomayor and myself, we depart. Because I went to CUNY and she went on to Princeton but, again, we're lost because we're the first to do this in our families. And we don't know. I don't even remember doing SAT. I don't remember any of that. I just went to Lehman College, took a lot of remedial courses, graduated, then went back, got my master's. And, to me, I was successful. But, that's affirmative action. I'm all for it.
Good for you.
With the assumption.
Go ahead, Linda.
No, I was just going to say, regarding the affirmative action, I totally, again, identify with people making assumptions about you based on your address and where you are. I worked with someone who just, every time the topic came up, he insisted that I went to a school down south. It just, that I went to, and there was nothing wrong with it, but that was his assumption. And, he'd go, and you should know about this. And I go, no, actually I went to school in Boston. And every few weeks it come up again. And he was just insistent because he could not get that mindset out.
Yeah. I actually thought they were trying to discourage her from going to college. Not to say that going to a parochial school is not a good experience as far as the education level of like Fordham, it's very, very high. But I thought they were just trying to discourage her from like going away to college, going to Ivy League, as though, they were making assumptions that was out of her league and she shouldn't, sort of dream that, quote unquote, dream that big.
And Ron, I wonder if that, because I totally agree with you, and I wonder if that has anything to do with the fact that she was not prepared academically for these colleges. Obviously, the advisor's seen something in her. She was obviously very smart. She was obviously a go-getter, but textbook-wise, in chapter 15, I'm moving ahead just a little bit, she's very clear that she was not prepared for those courses. Her English was way behind. Her grammar, her literacy was way behind. So perhaps on some level, instinctively, the Catholic school guidance counselors knew that. You know what I'm saying? Maybe they knew that, all right, you can go there, but we have not prepared you for that. So, you'll be there on your own. You're on your own after that if you get in, because I found that, those pages where she was just really vulnerable about how stressful it was for her, and how hard she had to work to catch up, if you will, to these other kids who had been, at private schools all their lives and had, tutors and all of the jazz their whole lives. And, they were much quicker than her. And yet they were all kind of sharing this space in academic culture.
I think the guidance counselors were purposely trying to keep her away from it. And I'm sure that they spoke to her about, for example, Notre Dame University. Okay, Notre Dame is like the Harvard of the Catholics. That's where we were all encouraged to go. Okay, because she obviously was a smart girl, and I'm sure she had good grades. But obviously she is emphasizing what is it like for a first generation going to college? Because she mentions the fact that she did end up applying to CUNY, and CUNY was like a cushion that if everything else failed, you would have something to fall back on. Okay? Remember, she didn't want to go to Columbia either. She didn't want to go to Ivy Columbia because she was, oh no, that's too close to home and too much comfort there and everything. So I found that
She didn't want to be in
comparison
New
very
York.
interesting. Okay, that was interesting, but it's interesting to know also that there are a good number of students who would spend 1 year in a place like Harvard or Yale as undergrads and come back and graduate from CUNY, from the Lehman colleges and the city colleges and the Hunter colleges. I think has anybody ever done that research? But you know, I know that they told her about Notre Dame University, okay, because there are some things that are standard, you know, look, Brigham Young University is like the Harvard of the Mormons, okay? Yeshiva University is like the Harvard of the Jewish people, okay?
Jewish people.
So I know that they told her about Notre Dame University, but they were not going to emphasize too much Harvard to her. So I think, I mean, I understand what you're saying, but she's talking about, and many of us have experienced, what was it like to be a first generation in college? Her mother went to Hostess Community College, which was totally different. It was geared towards the working population and even the Hispanic, their culture, right? Even today, it's like kind of geared that way. And I thought that was an interesting comparison. You are breaking barriers. Okay, so that's what I think.
First women to go to college, first Hispanics to go to college. And I met a lot of, even in American, even in the English speaking world, a lot of people, it's the first time for them to go to college. So, yeah, you're right.
But I don't even think they gave her the opportunity to go to Notre Dame. It just felt like any college that wasn't a city university, like, you know, you shouldn't think about. I mean, it didn't feel so much as it was about whether you stay in a Catholic school, as much as it felt like, you know, you are a young Puerto Rican and you should be happy to go to college in New York City. And don't dream so big of going to a Princeton or Harvard, even though she could have gone to Columbia. You know, Sonia was set on leaving New York City. You know, she was really, she was aspirational in her thinking. It wasn't like, I just want a degree, but I want to, you know, set my life on a certain path. And oftentimes, you know, going away to college is how you start that process of like setting up your life, your whole life.
Let's not forget the times that we're in. Also the pressure to gender conform. She did not want to, because same thing. She did not want to simply go to college for a couple of years, get married, start having babies. That wasn't her thing either. If she had stayed home, the pressure would have been on her to conform to the norms of her surroundings.
I agree.
Yeah, she mentions that. She mentions like, no, if I go to Columbia, then I have to live at home. It's way too close to comfort. Like,
Yeah, she didn't want to stay in New York.
Yeah.
I really
She needed that distance from her family to be able to concentrate on her studies.
But she still kept a boyfriend.
Oh yeah.
She wasn't concentrating that much.
Explain yourself, Mom. Explain yourself.
Well,
What do you mean by that?
When she goes to college is when she has a boyfriend. But he's at Stony Brook.
Yeah, party college.
Party college, which I found out. And
I
stayed,
A lot of those back
Weren't they
in the
together before they went to college?
They're like
During high school.
they're like high school sweethearts or something
Yeah.
before high
I thought
school.
it was interesting that she talks about the type of courses she's taking. And for somebody who lives in a certain environment, now she's making a comparison. You know, did you see page 165?
When you refer to pages, I have the hardcover book, so I want to follow.
Oh, okay.
But-
So that's going to be chapter 15.
Uh-huh.
That's on chapter 15, okay?
Go on.
And
What?
this is where she is several pages down that chapter, like 2 or 3 pages down. But again, I do have the soft cover one, but I have a hardcover one too, so I could and in there she said, I have always had a deathly fear of anything that scurries or crawls. She's talking about the laboratory science course that she had to take in some bugs and rodents, what have you. It wasn't just a stereotypical fear of a lady standing on a chair, though I'd done that. The special revulsion I feel goes backward to childhood. The giant cockroaches that infested the projects one year, we call them water bugs. That is still existing, I know, okay? Brought me to hysteria. How many times had I seen my mother take the whole place apart, trying to locate the mess? The very thought of their proximity would keep me awake all night. And so when I realized that the psych lab, now this is psychology and she had to take the laboratory, okay? This must be a psychology lab 101, which was, you know, did you take psych in college? Would oblige me to handle rodents where I study their reactions. I decided a little perversely to make the most of it, undertaking a course of what psychologists call exposure therapy. I devised an experiment that required me not only to hold a rat, but to implant electrolytes in their brains. So it almost sounds like now she's taking revenge psychologically on these rodents and things that.
Yay, why not?
And I think that's kind of even comical, but very realistic though.
It is comical.
I think
thought
it's
that was
very, yeah, I think it's very interesting how her fear is so crippling that it ends up interfering with her studies. The one thing that she is holds so dear to her heart.
Don't play with
that-
rats, man. They're
That scene
nasty.
where the rat is performing cannibalism in front of her and she completely like loses it. I thought that was a really telling of her character.
Who's not afraid of rats?
Wait a minute, there are people who have rats as pets.
Right.
Yeah, but those are docile because they can't afford hamsters, so they have rats, right? Mommy, give me that rat that crawl into the corner.
I used to have a hamster one time as a pet, but then I realized that we have too many rats and everything, so I didn't want, you know, but you know.
So you put a rat in the cage?
Yes, they'll put a rat in a cage because, you know, in the suburban, but here in New York City, I heard
Hello?
the rumor is that there are more rats in New York City than people. That's what I heard, okay?
Yeah, because rats eat pizza. Didn't you see that?
Yeah.
It's a rat. Yeah.
Did you see
I
that?
have a cat, so I have 0 rats. I have a cat.
There you go.
That's the best way. Not to have any rats to get a cat. But yeah, I thought that was a really telling of her character, how that incident kind of, and that also kind of shows you, even though like I look at her as this like larger than life character, that scene and that story of how seeing the interaction between the rat eating the other rat, how that completely destroyed her almost for a full semester.
Yeah.
That really kind of humanized her for me. I guess it also, you know, kind of proved how small of a community she was really from, to the point where she had never, you know, experienced nature in its full glory, where answers do eat other animals and have no qualms about it.
It's funny that you say that, Brandon. There were many moments when I felt the same way you just described, how I felt like, wow, this larger than life character, and this one thing is like, she didn't know that, you know, like she didn't do that, she didn't say that, she didn't speak up. And in those moments, I felt the same way, like, You
She
know,
does
like
talk in
she's
one
so much more like me.
previous chapter. She talks about her experience of going with her grandmother to the poultry shop.
Yeah.
Okay,
To the
and I
vivero,
thought that was
El
interesting.
vivero,
right?
that
The
was,
Yeah,
vivero.
I
and that was
experienced
very
that.
much a
That's
part of,
nasty.
especially
Yeah.
the Puerto Rican culture. Listen, I remember that as I used to hate to go to el vivero, but
Yeah.
our grandmothers did not make chicken soup if it had to be killed in front of them. That was just part of the culture, okay?
Yeah,
I
they
hated
didn't
on
buy
Saturday mornings to have
frozen
to go to
chicken
that.
from the supermarket.
And our grandmothers had to pick their chickens. You didn't just give them any chicken either. They had a strategy. So you had to go inside that stinky, smelly and vivero, they called it, and they would take and the butcher would take a turn with all the customers so they could pick their chicken, and then you would see him chop the head off of that chicken, and because guess what, our grandmothers were not going to make no what they call asopao de pollo. Who knows what asopao de pollo? That was that good old chicken stock with rice, okay? But it was a very, very a long process to make that, and it had to be killed in front of them, okay? And there's a chapter where she talks about that experience.
Yeah, early on,
Okay?
yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You know, still the rat is a rat.
Is-
It's
She
scary.
loved, I felt sad when she learned about her grandma.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That happened between 14 and 19, right?
It did.
Yes.
Okay.
I think a little later
I didn't
on.
want to go. I didn't want to
It's
go.
in the chat. It's no
think that happened a
I'm
spoiler.
little
on
later on.
23.
No spoiler alert, Anna Marie.
That's
But that
why
was, I really
asked.
thought that was really,
Good.
and then, again, that was another moment that was very intimate, and that I was very lucky. I felt to even that she shared that with us when her grandma was dying and she lights the cigarette in the hospital. I thought that was,
Yeah.
I could see and even smell the smoke. That was that was one of the really most, to me, one of the most vivid scenes that we get. We don't really get a lot of imagery in this book. We get a lot of things being told to us, almost because she is a justice. So it makes sense, right? That she's very, very clear with her words. So we don't get too many images, too many like really vivid scenes. But to me, that one really stuck out. I could see everything. There was.
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Ms. Linda.
No, I was just going to say with the grandmother, the other thing that stuck out with me is getting the envelope with the dollar in it. Because I remember getting those envelopes where, you know, the aunties and everybody, you know, every couple of weeks, I rush to the mailbox, and she's right. If you got a $5 bill, oh my God, that was seventh heaven. So that just really took me back. And it was also just a way of, when you got them, you felt connected to home, that everybody back home was pushing for you, even if they could only send you this dollar. I had a great aunt who would bake a cake every once in a while and send it. You share with the dorm, she would say, share with your roommate. And it just felt like everybody was pulling for you.
Yeah.
Nice.
Thanks for sharing that. That was beautiful. Yeah, I definitely felt that too with the dollar. But again, that also kind of is a reminder of, like, she even says, I think the exact quote is like, a dollar was not a small thing for my grandmother.
Right.
It wasn't a small thing for me either. You know, she like says that in the book. So I thought, like, again, that's one of those moments where it's like this larger than life character, a dollar was a big deal for her. You know what I'm saying? Not only for her, but for her family. That was a big deal. And not only that, but there's that scene where she hasn't made it to Princeton yet, but that's where she chose to go. And her mother are shopping for a raincoat. And they go into like a department store. And her mom were like, oh no, this is way too expensive. You know, we need to like take it back down to reality. And I even thought that was like, just again, so telling, but not only of, you know, of the author's family and surroundings and upbringing, but also of the change of the times with Ivy League schools, where they were really trying to fold other people that weren't white men, rich white men, into their campuses, right? Because it was very clear that, you know, she was a beneficiary of affirmative action, but she was a woman, and I think there only 3 years before that, she said that Princeton had started a co-ed campus. So it kind of is very telling to me, not only, you know, of the author and her family, but really of the times and how these Ivy League schools were trying to enroll students that can make the campus richer. I'm sure they did it in very clumsy ways at times, but to me, that was also very like, oh, okay, so they're choosing, there was a deliberate choice to choose Sonia to go. That was a deliberate choice on behalf of the guidance counselors at Princeton. You know what I'm saying? Like that wasn't a pity choice. Like they chose her for a reason.
Specifically,
You know?
She checked a lot of boxes.
She earned it.
Yes.
She
Mhm.
earned that.
That token, right? That's what we were known as back then.
The token, yes.
I
Also,
think there were a few other tokens, but
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Native American.
no, there were
Black,
some other Latino women.
Yeah,
and-
there was,
other Latinos.
right?
Mhm.
no, there was a whole association and
Yeah.
that she had joined later on and things
Yeah.
like that. But can I go
Acción
back
Right,
to
like Acción Puertorriqueña, something like
Right.
Yeah,
that.
that's it.
Yeah.
Can I go back to the grandmother being in the hospital or the grandmother's illness that led her into the hospital and how she had ovarian cancer that wasn't diagnosed because the grandma didn't know that, you know, she should still be going to doctors long after, I guess it was menopause she went through or.
And childbearing.
Childbearing
And
years.
that felt like it started to shape who Sonia Sotomayor would become, you know, by sort of making that note in the book. That kind of it felt like it was the beginning of you know, her personal activism. And she later on in those chapters that we read, she starts to talk about her own, you know, being involved in her community. So.
Yeah.
But going back to Puerto Rico, as an adult, she was looking at Puerto Rico in a different lens, knowing the political strives and, you know, the colonialism that it was going through. Now it was making, you know, later on, we learned later in life about other countries that our parents come from, and we absorb it. We really, like, there's a saying, yo no nací en Puerto Rico nació en mí. That's, I think, by Mariposa, one of those Bronx poets. And it's true, the more you learn about the history of Puerto Rico and any other country for that matter, other than the United States, because we don't learn this in school. God forbid they mention Puerto Rico. And now I just heard in the news, they have a new curriculum for Black studies in the schools K through 12. It's about time, you know, that comes to fruition. But, you know, she's learning, and now she got brains behind it, and she's gonna go for her note, which is her paper. They call it the note. And was it she in Princeton? So it's, you know, El Grito de Lares, Albizu Campos, all those people that really were not crazy about what the United States was doing in Puerto Rico at the time.
Well, it was hard for women back then, just being a woman, and then being a woman and a Latina and trying to enter the college system. I mean, that is the first for a lot of people, and anyone who did it, I really have some respect for them.
No, absolutely.
And that's one thing that she's starting to say about why she decided to get married to begin with, because it's like part of the culture that if you're a woman and you're like living away from home for a while, you're supposed to be like a married woman. And I think that's kind of what led her into falling in love with Kevin, you know, and it's like, to one extent, you know, women are geared, there's a gender situation, but at the same time, now there's a culture of what is expected of you as a woman. And you're kind of trying to please and fit into that round. And I think
And
she's talking about it.
It keeps changing, you know,
Yeah.
it really does. Because
It doesn't feel like she is madly in love though.
No, I don't
You
think she
know,
is. She's
doesn't-
in life.
So far anyway, you know, what we read.
She's
And
inconvenience.
and
He's
she
Yeah.
says, yeah,
convenient.
if she wants him to come visit her and they're gonna be like kind of together, maybe that's why they should get married. So it looks right.
Yeah.
Because, if a woman lives with a guy or, vice versa, but that's why they got married. I don't think, she don't talk too much about being in love with him. She liked his company.
Yeah, when he visits, they don't even do anything. And then I think that she has a roommate who gives them the room, every time he comes.
And all they
But
do is study.
They study. That's all they
They
do.
do something, they study. What do you mean they don't do anything, Ron? Can you explain yourself?
That is true, Anna. That is something.
Yeah, you're right, Ron. She really doesn't rhapsodize about Kevin.
Yeah.
But maybe that's a good thing. Maybe she's just doing that on purpose to kind of prove a point that maybe it was a marriage of convenience, or maybe she's trying to say that love can look a lot of different ways, right? Marriages can function in a lot of different ways. It doesn't have to be a traditional way. But you're absolutely right. I made that observation as well, especially when they move in together, when they're in Connecticut, New Haven. I think she even says like it's really
does.
Yeah, she talks about how it's, what's the word she used? I think she's like it's equal. It's like 50-50. It's half and half. He
cooks, she does the dishes, yada yada.
Yeah.
She does, yeah.
Share.
Yeah, absolutely. I observed that as well. And I did think that it was interesting when she was talking about doing some of the recording some of the elders, and how when she was like, she says on page 200 in the paperback, it's in chapter, I think, 18. She talks about how those recordings have recently resurfaced, and now she's listening to them and inserting her own opinions and jumping on the faintest hint of racism in their comments. It was my campus conditioning. I thought that line, it was my campus conditioning, really stood out to me. And she goes on to say, I found it unfathomable that people who themselves have been subject to so much prejudice on the mainland still clung to ideas about color as a gauge of status, as a way to keep score of how many of your ancestors had come from Spain, how many from Africa. It's just, she kind of like really like it's almost in that kind of sentence, she's almost like telling us like she hasn't figured it out yet either. She's still learning. She's still working through it. Like she's still like going back and reading notes and listening to things with a fresh mind even. So I really like that section where she, nothing is like as concrete as you would think it was, because she's a justice, so things are very concrete. This is the ruling, but it's really not like that with her thoughts and then kind of the way that she thinks about the world. It seems like she's still learning like the rest of us. So I really appreciated that section.
Well, unless we do a DNA test, it's really hard to tell. We're all here from another country. We're all here as migrants. We all came here to settle.
The one thing, I'm sorry, Brandon.
I was just gonna say really quickly, but then also, and then on the reverse of that, not only does someone mistake her for being a white Jewish woman when she was working at the bagel shop in the Bronx, but also when she's arguing the case, like one of the jurors has mistaken her for being like a brassy. I think he calls her
a brassy Jewish. I don't like brassy Jewish women.
Yes. So I just found that quite interesting too, kind of like how she like lives in these like worlds as she is and as she looks, and kind of how people perceive her, but how she perceives other things. It's just very complex. And
how she responded to that was on point too.
Yes.
Yeah.
She's like, yeah, that is your problem.
No, she was just like, yeah, I guess I can't help you with that. Not Jewish.
And she's a judge. She can do that.
Ron, what were you going to chime in?
I kind of felt the opposite in, I guess it's chapter 19. Like it didn't feel as intimate to me. It felt like she was almost embellishing her resume. You know, I don't know, I can't really explain it, but when she's young, I felt more connected to her narrative. But now that she has gone to college, it almost feels like she's just going down a list of accomplishments. And she's just like, she is, what do they call that? Like you fill it out. Like, so it might be, it felt like bullet points that she kind of built some paragraphs around.
That she's checking off her boxes.
Yeah, that's what it felt like. You know, she's doing this, she's with the boyfriend, she's with the Puerto Rican group, she's doing the study. There was a couple of other things, the mock court. I don't know what, and that could be my own racism that I'm bringing into it, thinking like, you know, oh, she's a Puerto Rican sister, she must do ABC. And she's living her life. You know, maybe I'm building expectations around who she should be based on where she's from. And she's just, you know, living her best life. And I'm not, I like the simple Bronx life.
You know, you're right, Ron. I think I have to agree with you on that part. When she goes to grad school, I think she's at Yale in chapter 19. She has graduated from Princeton. She's at Yale, right? So I think you're right. Once we get into that space, it is much more choppy almost.
It felt
We don't
choppy
really
to me anyway.
Yeah, I think I would have to agree with that. We don't really get
There's no more personal, right? There's nothing personal there.
Grandma's dead.
Yeah.
Well, maybe that's college life for her, you know?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
She ain't in no Lehman College. She's in Princeton and Yale, and she's studying her butt off.
Yeah.
And she's getting all these awards. So
yeah,
she probably didn't want to bore us with the.
That's probably what stands out to her. So that's probably why she shared that.
Yeah, it almost felt like she was writing this from the perspective of a Supreme Court justice trying to build that narrative of her life, you know, trying to build out the acceptable narrative of her life, you know, like, you know, that's how we create mythology around people, you know, whether it is George Bush #2, you know, he was a drunk and he was a dropout, he was everything. But that's how you build a narrative around your life, I guess. You know, if you have the privilege to write a book, you can, you know, start sort of shaping how people see you. And that's what it feels like to me. There's a word that I'm trying to think of that's not coming to me though.
Was she perhaps just trying to build a bridge between her two worlds? Did she
it could be.
use this chapter to sort of get us from, because there is a mentality, we can say it all we want, but there is a mentality that you have when you come from where we come from, and then you suddenly find yourself in a whole nother environment. So maybe this was written just as much for her to be able to believe it as it is to get us to where she is.
No, absolutely.
Well, even going to CUNY, you know, when you're living in the South Bronx and you're living amongst your people, Blacks and Latinos, when you go to college, you get to meet you get to meet actually white people and Chinese people. And it's like, wow. So for me, college in the beginning was a social thing. It was not academic so much. It was like, wow, look at all these people, like a hick. And I'm still in the Bronx. Yeah. So, you know.
Yeah, and I didn't go to college, so maybe I'm bringing my own, you know, my own shortcomings to how I view her.
There's still time, Ron. You can still go.
Yeah, go for
it. And I think that, believe it or not, I think Education does that. I think education is a bridge. I don't care what college, where you go, okay? Because that is one way of coming out of ourselves, okay? And I know that I do a lot of peer mentoring to some of the high school kids. And I try to tell them, even if it's just going to your local community college and getting that associate degree, go ahead and do it if you can, you know, because it will be, I think that's when we realize, it's in college that I had realized that all the biggest lessons that you're going to learn are not going to come from the textbook. Okay. And the
Yes.
most practical experiences in college do not come really from academics. Okay. So I think that that was remember that education, and even today, college is considered to be something for the elitist population. You know, I don't care if it's CUNY or SUNY or Harvard or where you go, but I do know that even today it is the aristocracy population, because guess what? The people who go to college, I know in my college experience it was like that. It was these 18-year-old kids who came from well-to-do families. They graduate from high school. Their parents don't know what to do with them, so they send them off to the university. And that was the perspective, okay? But the other kids, so, you know, they probably have to go to work and help out the parents and the family and everything. So even today, higher education is considered to still be a luxury. Yeah. So isn't that interesting, you know? And now they're starting to try to make it available for more people. I mean, I hope that tuition free, at least in the community college, I hope that does pass. I hope it does. I think that will be a big bridge for, but guess what? It has not passed yet, you know, and the truth is that even today, who are the people who get a higher education? Come on, I would think that 90% of those people were people, they graduated from high school and really didn't know, well, I didn't know what else to do with my life and time. What else am I going to do? So my mom and dad send me off to the so-called university. Okay, and there you go. And yes, they come from well-to-do families. Listen, I remember kids in college that their parents hired private secretaries to do their term papers for them and everything. You see what I'm saying? You know, it was 10% of us who did things like work full time and go to college, but the majority
like her
of
mother
them
wanted her to do.
Yeah,
Yes,
exactly.
yes.
You know,
There you go. It's not just the wealthy.
yeah,
Her mom did that as well. And I think
Yeah.
that her mom had a big influence.
Listen, I was one of those kids. I remember I used to love literature. So I was one of the kids that the rich parents for the well-to, they used to try to hire me to do their papers for them. See what I'm saying? And here you are. And when you're a kid who is trying to make it on a slight budget, I had a part-time job, but you know, every now and then on the weekends when I had nothing to do, I would go ahead and charge $50 per page and have a little spare change in my pocket. I was like, you know what? I'm going to take advantage of the situation.
That's
because
expensive.
I am not.
Yeah, you were providing a really good service, so
You know what I'm saying? And literature, I was in English, but I was very good at English. And literature was my favorite. I was very good at that, and they knew it because kids, you know, have a way of knowing who is it that gets the A's and who doesn't. And the parents would come to me, oh, listen, could you please type up her paper? I was like, okay, I'll tell you what. I charge $100 per page. And if it's a special English paper, it's going to be $50 extra. But you know what? They would pay it. They would actually
afford it, man.
And they would go ahead and try to make a further contract. Oh, listen, next year when she goes to grad school, could you do her essay for her too?
Didn't you feel guilty? Didn't you feel guilty?
You know, no, I didn't feel guilty. You know, I was like, you know what? That's $200 more.
Oh, I thought you were just
doing
it. Or I think they should do their own and then we type it. I think they should do their own and we type it.
Exactly. So yeah.
You're a capitalist.
Yeah. That's what, yeah, my daughter would say, capitalist.
You know, by the end of the week, I had a pretty good piece of change in my pocket.
Yeah,
I bet.
What are you doing with all that money?
I did find it, I don't know, maybe y'all can explain this to me, because I felt like I learned a lot last week when we were talking about, actually I was chatting about last week to my friend, and I was telling her, I was like, did you know the projects when they initially were built were for working class families and they were like very well maintained and taken care of? And she was like, no. I was like, yeah, everyone in my book club was like telling me their personal experiences, right? And so I'm wondering, you know, there's a lot of, and I don't know if maybe I'm reading too far into this, but she kind of makes it a point to talk a lot about the Mexican friends that she has and kind of how they combine their cultures and the dancing and the food. And I was wondering if there was any significance to that as far as like the Puerto Rican culture versus the Mexican culture versus the growing up in the Bronx versus.
Versus with Mexicans is more inclusive, I think. You had a lot of Mexicans in California doing their own movements, but yeah, she appreciated it. Singing and guitar, food.
I think she felt like they had something in common and that, you know, they came from two different places, you know, culturally it was two different Spanish backgrounds, but intimately what they had in common is being one nationality and being surrounded by a totally different, right? A whole bunch of white people. So, you know, they both felt like outsiders, and I think that they kind of, right, became friends because of that.
Well, she talks about how there were two separate groups, but they often worked with each other, like on different, there were two separate platforms, but they would often come together to work.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just wondering, like, why were there two, like, I don't know, it would just seem like it would be one platform.
Y amigos.
Right, yes.
Yeah, amigos.
So I don't know, I was just wondering if there was any significance to that. I really enjoyed kind of reading about, it seems like her college experience was just so rich and so full. She talks about going to a nice Chinese restaurant for the first time. And I'm like, how was that even possible, you know? But I guess there were none where she grew up. There were no like nice Chinese spots.
Chinese takeout.
Well, she hadn't wandered much from her neighborhood.
Right.
So she probably never went to Chinatown.
No.
Right.
White Castle, takeout Chinese.
White Castle, yes.
Because there weren't even that many Hispanic restaurants in the neighborhoods back then.
It struck me as to just how small her world really, I mean,
Yeah.
like she'd never heard of Alice in Wonderland.
Right.
She ignores her invitation to the Phi Beta Kappa.
Yeah.
And it's like, dang, this was really small.
Yeah.
You know, she was really, really small.
Yes, I definitely made that note too. I made that same note.
Again, that's what education does. It broadens us. Okay, because guess what? To be honest, I didn't know what Phi Beta Kappa was either until I got to college. Okay, I didn't even know what a sorority fraternity was until I got to college. Okay, and once that they saw a line of women singing and carrying on, oh, that's what a sorority is. I didn't know any of that when I was in high school. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying. That's what education does. It broadens you. It lets you see something that we would probably think never even existed.
I think the argument though isn't that. I think the argument is that you can most certainly learn about Chinese restaurants, fraternities, sororities if you simply leave your neighborhood. She would seem like she just didn't leave her neighborhood. Like,
right, that's what I'm saying. She never even went to Chinatown.
Right.
Or else she would have, experienced.
Why would she go if there was Chinese takeout all over the place?
I bet most people don't leave their neighborhoods growing up. You know,
I didn't.
Your neighborhood is your neighborhood.
I beg to differ. I think a lot of people leave their neighborhoods. I think a lot of people leave their
Only to go to Coney Island on the train every now and again.
If it was convenient.
Yeah.
But the truth is, I have to admit, as a child, I was born and raised in New York City here, and we did kind of keep to our, if there was maybe a special occasion, let's say there was like that special festival going on, that's when we would go to Little Italy, you know, for that Feast of San Antonio or something. But you didn't really get a taste of what Italian. You went there and you bought yourself a sausage thing at the cart there, and then you came home.
That's it.
You went to one of the rides, you know, and okay, I remember living next to the D train, and sometimes we would take it on weekends and go to Coney Island.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? Because that's what it's like to be a native New Yorker. But at the end of the day, when we went to Coney Island, we got ourselves a Nathan hot dog.
You came back home.
Hung out by the beach, by the boardwalk. Then we took the train and we were right back in our own little town of the Bronx.
Everything you needed was right at home.
Brooklyn from there, so it's very easy to stay. Although we did go out there, we were always in our little cocoons.
Yeah.
Okay, because when the Nathan hot dog is finished and the boardwalk is finished and the carnival ride is over, okay, guess what? You just take that train and it rides you all the way back home.
Go to Orchard Beach.
Anything about the culture of the people, this in that Brooklyn area?
And this New York is really different from the New York of the 70s. It's more, well, at least it presents to be more integrated and it's easier to go from neighborhood to neighborhood. But growing up, like you just couldn't just gallivant into someone else's neighborhood.
You had your ass kicked.
It's a big thing.
That's true.
A lot of times women didn't drive back then either.
True,
You had to wait till your dad came home from work to go.
If you had a dad.
Yeah, a lot of it depended on whether or not your family had access to a car.
Well, again, and she talks about that in her book. She talks about taking that Amtrak train and having to take that bus all the way to Boston to go see Harvard, you know, because again, she didn't come from a family. Remember that most of these other kids, when they're 18 years old, their parents give them a card for their birthday. But come on, she is a child that her mother is on a set budget, and her brother had part-time jobs to help out. So her family was not going to be able to afford what most of those kids' family could, like getting you a car. And 90% of these people who go to campus, they have their own cars and their families pay for it. All right, and their families send them a check every single Friday so they can pay for the gas and the upkeep of that car, right? But obviously, folks like her and myself who have little part-time jobs to pull ourselves through, we can't even afford that ticket sometimes to take that Amtrak.
And she was going to school, right? She was working and going to school.
Hey, just being able to take that Greyhound bus is a luxury all by itself, okay? You know?
Yeah, it was. It still is.
It still is, right?
Which means it means so much more that you got your degree, as it was much harder for you to get it in the first place. So it means a lot to everyone. It means a lot to, if you believe in God, it means a lot to God that you got it anyway.
Oh, well, thank you for looking at it that way, but I have to admit, I never saw it that way. I kind of always saw it like my mother used to say, Archie, what are you doing studying so much? You really think college is going to get you? But it's interesting. No, it wasn't until after you graduated.
That's a parochial school student.
Okay, yeah.
You guys, I'm really proud of you because it was a much harder hardship to get there. So, and I understand.
No, Anna, quite simple. We were breaking barriers. Quite simple, okay? And we were the first generation to go to even think of going to college. Come on, our parents were people that if they could even make it to high school, that was an accomplishment.
Really?
You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
So,
And
that's how it is. You'd be surprised where some of these youngsters come from. Okay, they're the first ones to even graduate from high school. Never mind even going to college. So the fact is that all of us have to become pioneers in our own right. I think that's what Sotomayor. You know, quite simple. We had to break the barrier, and it's quite simple.
We did.
And we all made choices. She made a choice to identify with her situation. I have to look at now the whole psychology. She made a choice to, let's not forget the title of the book, because I kept asking myself, why would someone who goes through all this, and the title, it might be Love World. And she's talking about love on top of all this. See what I'm saying? So she obviously is making a choice to identify with something that in the long run is going to mold you. You know? And which I could identify with, because for all the hardships I went to, there was always someone there that did reach out, you know? And I wonder if it wasn't because of that challenge, I probably wouldn't have met that loving person. Okay? You know, so I could identify, yet for all the hated people who said, oh, gee, I've never seen a person with your complexion come to this college, this and that. But guess what? I always met somebody who did reach out. And though, like that song said, those are the ties that bind us, you know?
And what about President Obama? We have to give him a real, I'm trying to think of the right word, but he took a chance and it really paid off.
You know, and he was outcasted too, because he turned out to be, look, the only Black one in his family. His mother had passed away then when he was very young, and he went on his own to see who his father's family is. And so as a result, here is a little Black child left in a white family. That's how it was, okay? And then his mother went to Indonesia, so he got to go to school there. But the truth is that sooner or later in life, we have to make choices.
Right.
Okay, and I respect a person's choice. Let me tell you, I respect a person's choice that decides to go the other way and just go. I mean, look, I couldn't help you. You want to know something? All throughout this book, this is controversial, what I'm going to say, but I kept thinking of, like, what about that other Supreme Court judge, Clarence Thomas? He made choices too, but you know what? I'm going to
His book goes on the list. We'll read it and talk about him.
But Anna, I'm going to respect that, because I feel all of us as individuals, we have a right to make a choice. You know, hey, he's got that right, and I'm going to respect that in its place. See what I'm saying?
Yeah,
that's what a beloved world could do for you.
So what do y'all think about the photos? I think that her mother, I didn't realize it, is insanely beautiful.
Yes.
And I think there is something about pretty privilege that really it is a real thing in this society. Her mother is insanely beautiful. Like, she's really pretty. And I wonder, you know, if her beauty and her style, that influence kind of, although they were living in the Bronx, and I think at one point the author mentioned she never had an outfit that was like over $50 when she gets the suit in college. So I mean, they have all of these kind of financial barriers, but however, I think her mother, the elegance that her mother has, kind of erases that in a sense. I don't know really how to describe it, but it seems like she was very focused and a very serious woman, but she's so pretty that I wonder,
Remember that her mother was a military lady at one point.
Correct.
Her mother once had a military career.
Correct.
Okay? So and those were considered to be very attractive women.
Correct. So I'm wondering, for example, the doctor who, when he passes away, leaves them $5,000 of the insurance policy, and how her mother was just so focused and kind of really seemed to, even though she was living in the South Bronx in the projects, life, it kind of really seemed easy for them. It seemed, and her husband died, she was a widower. Her life still kind of seemed, there was still some sort of grace about her through this book. And then I get to these pages and I realize how beautiful she was, and how graceful she was, and how stylish she was. You know, she really doesn't look like someone's mom in any of these pictures, you know, like, I don't know, that's one thing that stood out to me. The level of grace and the level of beauty that Sonia kind of was surrounded by in the midst of all the chaos.
I think that was part of the era. I mean, back then you weren't allowed to go downtown unless in jeans. I can probably still remember the first time that I actually dared wear a pair of, back then they call them what, dungarees on the train to go down to Macy's or something. So, you know, I think that some of that grace that you're seeing is just part of the era. Now, if you're suggesting that she and the doctor had a little something, I don't know.
Yeah.
No.
Hey, Brandon.
No. No, there was no suggestion of that. It's just that level of pretty privilege is a real thing to me, you know, like.
Well, Puerto Ricans are beautiful
She said
people.
in
What
the
can I
book
say?
that her mom was very like prim and proper.
Yeah.
But you know, there's something else going. Her mother knew how to sew. And I know one thing among especially ethnic women who sew, they're very particular about even what their children wear. And I know my mother was like that, and they're very prim and proper women.
Yeah.
It kind of goes with the territory.
Yeah.
You know, how many of us had moms that sewed? I know my mother used to sew and was always fixing you could not have anything out of line, like especially when you went to church.
True.
Okay. You were gonna have the
Easter
matching
was a big
gloves,
deal. You got
the
everybody
matching
dressed, whether
gloves
you
with
had
the
money or not.
matching hat and the and there were certain things
Yeah.
that your mother just was not gonna let you go out the house with.
If you had a
Also-
little,
Other
if you had a
kids
little
did
tear
things
in the clothing,
weren't.
Yep.
she would tear that off you.
Exactly. There were other kids that did wear their jeans to go to Macy's and go downtown. Not her children. Not
Right,
you,
yeah.
okay? You are
And
not
this
little
is-
orphan kids, and I'm not running an orphanage here. So my mother had a philosophy, especially when she had a sewing machine that she could sew.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
but there were other kids that walked around like that. But she said, but not my kids. So I think her mother was a very prim and proper and lady. And remember, her mother was once in the military with that standard uniform. So I'm sure her mother did have a certain physique. Because
Yeah.
look, to be in the military, you had to even be a certain weight. Think about
Also,
it, okay?
yeah.
So automatically you're gonna have a certain physique. You couldn't be over a certain weight even to be able to even be accepted in the military, right?
yeah.
Even today,
Also,
that's
this
like,
is
think about it.
Yeah, this is also probably the last generation where there's a clear delineation between how children dress and how adults dress. Now it's just like one big mishmash, everybody, kids and adults dress the same. But this is, you know, women wore skirts and men wore suits. That was changing in the 70s, but you know, if you were like a teen or adult in the 70s, you still had that influence of your parents who were, you know, from the 40s and 50s. So that generation is probably the final Sonia's generation, and her parent and her mom, of course, is probably that final generation where you did dress up to go to church or you did dress up to go to work.
Men
you know,
always had jackets, suit
Yeah.
jackets, sports jackets, even if they weren't going to a really fancy place, if they were out with their ladies, they
Yeah.
had some sort of jacket on.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Sonia talks about that too, Ron. Sonia talks about how her mother was very graceful, but she was always kind of frumpy and like kind of clumsy. And how did you all read the line about how she said she literally wore the same pair of shoes for like ever? Not because, you know, or because she just like liked the shoes, but also because it was hard for her to walk in like new shoes. So when she got a pair that she broke in, she just kept them in. And her grandmother, like Ron was saying, her grandmother was like, no, please do it for me. Like get a new pair of shoes, you know, like.
And I could understand that because I'm that kind of person that once I break into a pair of shoes, it's hard for me to now to have to break into a new pair. You know what? Once my shoe forms into that foot of mine, it's kind of painful to now break into a new pair. I'm like that also.
Once you break the mold, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I
Let the
could
shoes
understand
fall
what you're
off.
saying. You know, but it's also part of culture. You're not going to wear raggedy shoes
Right.
to walk out of this house because it doesn't look right. You know, but I mean, hey, my mom used to say, you can wear the most beautiful dress in the world. If you don't have on the right pair of shoes, it's just not going to look right. Okay, so I could understand. But even today, a dress code has always, look, I was helping the summer youth employment, and we had to have some strict rules and regulations. And the kids thought we were very strict, but we told them that that once they came into the door, we told the guys, look, you got to pick up your pants. You got to pick your pants up, okay? It's forbidden for them to wear, you know, that style of them wearing the pants out, and the girls, we wouldn't allow them to wear shorts. But back in my day and age, they used to call it the hot pants. The hot pants. When I used that, they all laughed at me.
I remember those.
And because now,
Oh, yeah, I wasn't allowed to wear those because my parents thought that.
yeah, but we used to let the girls know, listen, you're not allowed to walk in here with those, there's another name for them now. They call them the short underwear. Something is what they call them.
What?
The hip hop shorts.
Gucci shorts.
But it's all the same thing.
Oh
Back
my
in my day,
God.
we called them the hot pants. It's not
Oh,
allowed.
remember go-go hot pants and go-go
Go-go
boots?
boots.
Yeah. And the food. You remember
Listen, Brandon, this is a style. It might come back.
Okay? And they think that we're being strict with
The
them.
bell
but
bottoms,
one thing,
all those good things.
At least it was a style though.
when the boys come into the building, they have to take off the hat. We want them to take off their caps, okay? And they think that we're being, but it's not that we're being strict. It's that we're trying to teach them what is
about it.
proper. Okay, but that style of the pants hanging down, we're like, guess what? Before you come into the door, pick your pants up. Okay.
I want that job. I want that job to tell them kids to pick up them damn pants. Nobody want to see them
It's funny
nasty
because
underwear.
I think the author talks briefly about how she was a bouncer at one point at a club.
Yeah.
How she took it very seriously.
I thought that was really fun. I was like, wow.
She really wanted
that's
to be the
another side to her.
bartender, but
Yeah.
Yeah. So we got about 15 minutes left. Does anyone want to chime in? I know a couple people just logged on. Someone who maybe hasn't said anything yet, want to bring up anything we haven't talked about yet, or any comments?
call them by name.
Call them out.
If not, or just chime in whenever you like if you have something we haven't gotten to yet. But yeah, I think that one thing that also really stood out to me was kind of how she really enjoyed arguing in class, and how I think someone mentions like, oh my gosh, Sonia, you argue like a man. And then at another dinner, someone like brings up affirmative action in a very like classless way, and she like kind of has to navigate through these very difficult conversations.
Yeah.
But I do like how there was one line in there, I can't find it, where she says something like, I was always very, nice and kind, but, if anyone like rubbed me the wrong way, like the Bronx would come out. Like, I really appreciated that, how she kind of, she was like, I wasn't trying to assimilate too hard, I was just doing my job, but if someone tried it, I really enjoyed
Puerto Rican will come out.
Yeah, how she kind of like navigated these conversations, but really didn't let anyone push her around, even though she was really, really out of place, up there.
I would call it I didn't say the Bronx. I would be very specific. My South Bronx is about to come out.
I would say I'm from the South.
My South Bronx.
The South Bronx.
Yeah.
You just don't mess with us.
That never leaves you.
Nope.
You don't mess with us because we've been through a lot.
Yeah, she has some great like lines at the beginning of these pages here. And again, she mentions how she's not going to be going into what she does, on the bench. She mentions that again in these pages, and we got it way earlier. So I thought that was very interesting too. How
I thought that was interesting too.
That makes me feel like she's just setting up a next memoir that will cover her Supreme Court years.
Well, she's just getting into it. Give her time.
And she might have, 20 more years.
Yep. Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But that also goes back to my earlier point about how in memoirs, people, and I always say this every time we read a memoir, how people, shape their lives to be potentially more heroic than it probably was, you know, because she is even admitting, you know, she's not giving us everything. So don't expect any Supreme Court, you know, decision surprises, you know, in the later chapters or anything like that.
Right. She doesn't even give us what she's reading. She doesn't even give us, you know, who she's reading, who she's with. Definitely lets us in on her mentor and that relationship, but she does not put us on her theory at all. She says, you know, very clear of that. And I wonder, you know, Ron, I will have to say that out of all the memoirs we've read, I would have to say that this one is the most honest. Wouldn't you agree? I feel like this one was the one doing the least stretching.
I don't know. You don't know.
I think she tries to stay factual too. I actually get that from her, like very honest. I think whatever she doesn't want to say, she just doesn't say it, but she lets you know, I'm not saying it.
Right.
She doesn't, you know, she doesn't speak ill of anyone. I think the only derogatory remark I ever heard her say about anybody, where she, even if she showed anger towards somebody, she always kind of like justified their feelings, like she tried to take on their perspective. But she talked about her cousin Nelson, who showed up at her grandmother's funeral high,
Yes.
nodding off, and she was so upset by that.
Yeah.
And,
That is the only time
you
she ever
know,
shows judgment.
yes, that was like the only time I remember throughout the book where she showed judgment towards someone.
Yeah.
You know,
He
where
was a
she
drug
was just
addict.
like, you could tell she was pissed about that, really like disappointed and angry, you know, and I was
Yeah.
like, wow.
She's still not over that.
Yes.
She's still not over that. Yeah.
Yes. Like that's something she's still holding on to.
And
But it's
things
also
like-
something very safe for her to hold on to, because she can't be faulted for being upset with a family member for disrespecting the
Right.
grandmother.
Right.
She's still walking
Yeah.
a very fine line about what she shows us. You know, I mean, nobody's going to pick her apart for being upset. They probably
being
pick her apart
upset
if
about that,
she didn't
yeah.
say something. Yeah.
Right.
I was actually shocked that she admitted interning for Herman Badillo, who you know, kind of lost some of his shine, you know, later in his career, because Herman Badillo, although he started out like as a really heroic figure, I believe he was the first elected Puerto Rican official in New York City.
Yeah.
Later on, he became quite, or I don't know if he became or he always was, kind of a conservative. I think he even switched parties later on in his career. And she had, although she was sort of lent out to the campaign, you could see how something like that would also shape her as far as the legal system and politics is concerned and things like that.
But she didn't have anything negative to say about him either.
No.
You know, she didn't say too much, but she did, you know, admit to having had that experience with his campaign.
Yeah.
Actually, you know what do y'all think about when she was talking about, this is another time where she doesn't show judgment, but she definitely kind of takes a side when she was talking about kind of rioting and rallying together in the protests and how they at sometimes can do more harm than good. Do y'all remember that scene?
I do remember that.
That was another point where she was kind of very clear on where she stood.
Yeah.
You know?
She'd rather be behind the scenes with her intellectual, judicial ideas than out in front as a brawler. You know,
Right.
like a lot of riots that we get into, you know, we're right there getting hurt, getting arrested. So that's her stand. That's a good
She
stand.
didn't give me like activist vibes. She gave me community service vibes, right?
Yeah.
She was all about community service, but activism wasn't on her greater scale of things, you know?
Which is cool, you know, because she is involved at least. She's just not like, at least she suggests she's involved, but she's not like the leader of the pack as far as, you know, somebody who's going to be marching up front. But it does feel like her politics are clearly, you know, aligned with being a progressive, or back then a liberal.
Well, she got drilled for that.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right.
And then, yeah, well, I was gonna get into something else, then I remembered that's down the line.
No
No,
spoilers.
Anna Marie.
It's
no.
hard, I'm trying, and I'm trying.
You want to end on the last note again?
No,
Well, so far so good. We made it this far. No fights or anything.
Aw, too bad.
that was funny.
I want to know what seabed means. I didn't have time to look it up.
Mm.
Did anybody look that up? Seabed rights?
Seabed fights, no.
Seabed rights.
There was another one, there was another acronym that she used too, that I'm not familiar
Yeah.
with.
was
War something, I think it started with a W or something.
It was ILs too. The ILs, I
There
don't know
was-
if that.
yeah,
this
there was
because
quite a few.
ILs were divided to small.
Mm.
Anyway, it's all good. It's all good. So
Yeah, there was at one point where she was kind of just naming names and people off, and I felt like that was more for like her contemporaries to like feel like they were a part of the book who were from the Bronx, you know?
Mhm.
Yeah, people she wrote with.
Make things interesting for them, right?
Yeah, because it's nice kind of, especially when you go to school with somebody, it's kind of nice seeing them mention things that you guys were together in the same years, you know, especially if you didn't grow up in the same neighborhoods. I think that kind of bonds you. Because there was like a whole paragraph where she was just naming off names, and I was like, okay, like what is she doing here?
Right.
All her mentors are teachers or professors. Yeah. Thank you. She's saying thank you to them, probably.
In that way, right?
We still got a lot of book left for her to start saying her thank yous now.
Right.
A lot of people
Right. But I guess it's kind of maybe because it was like in the college year, she wanted to keep them in the same vicinity. But I did, you know, it's funny because once I got to chapter 19, I was like, so what's left? You know, I feel like I know everything I need to know about her. So I am curious to keep going.
But I mean, she does
There's
even
quite
though,
a bit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
even though she's not talking about her Supreme Court years, she was a judge, and I would assume a lawyer, you know, for many years.
Yeah.
So there's probably quite a bit to, you know, and how she gets on, you know, Obama's radar, things like that alone are.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to reading that part, Ron.
If they get that far, I don't know.
if she writes about
I'm
it.
not peeking that far ahead, but
Oh, as a
does
matter of fact,
mention-
what year does this book? I forgot when it was published. Was it? in
83.
this?
This was it's no 90.
about 3 years ago.
93, 8 years ago, she wrote this.
Oh, wow, 8 years? Wow.
She wrote this, yeah, because in 2013, sorry, but still, that's
Yeah,
8 years.
2013 is when it was copyright.
Wow,
That's-
that's a while
Yeah,
ago.
that's
that's
8
just-
years.
Yeah, that's just when Obama did his thing, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, no, we were in full Obama mode back
That's
then.
right.
Mhm.
He just won, the second term.
The second term, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And we see how important her appointment was,
Mhm.
Yeah.
you know, considering like Trump came in and just like every year he appointed 3 justices in 4 years, some crazy.
Yeah, nobody
amount.
does that.
Well, 2 of the
Oh.
3 are terrible, but at least 1 is kind of,
But that's you know
Yeah,
how
well, he's
that
a
all
pig.
kind
What
of
do you want?
connects. Yeah,
That's what pigs do.
yeah, I'm sure it'll come up, but I'm interested to know, like, is it in her college years? And we're gonna wrap it up in a second, but is it in her college years that she even starts thinking about something like the Supreme Court? I mean, because I honestly think that there's some presidents, Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, Joe Biden, in their college years, I believe they were thinking about being president. And I just wonder, do judges who have to progress through, you know, the local system to the state, to the federal, then to the Supreme Court, like, do they start thinking about it early on? And does that influence their decisions? You know, what the decisions that they have to make so that they have the resume that's needed to become a Supreme Court justice?
I don't think I think she just barely wants to be a judge at one point, because that internship that she did where she fails, then she starts, you know, pounding herself and really like going back to, you know, page 1 or whatever. And, you know, so she has her lawyerism and then her judgeism and then.
Yeah, no, I know that's how it works, you know, as far as the process.
And those people come from money too, where they could think that way.
Yeah, and judges have to, you know, local judges have to run for office. So you have to raise money, at least in New York anyway.
Yeah.
So you have to almost raise money like a politician. And, you know, what does that do?
That she became a district attorney. And I know also that when she had some slight experience in a law firm before becoming a district attorney, there were many of her colleagues that did not want to work with her for various reasons. They didn't like her point of view on things, okay? She became very set in some of her decisions. So it was many of them that had encouraged her to apply for those positions. I don't even think she even thought of ever making her way to becoming like a district attorney. She did it because they had encouraged her to do that. And they probably did it to try to get rid of her. Okay, you know what? In our professional lives, that does happen.
Yeah.
Okay, I mean, we have to look at the realistic side that sometimes even a person might even like get laid off from their job, but in the meantime receive that great promotion at that new company. And that turns out to be a balance even that when you look back at your career, sometimes you say, oh my goodness, however did I even tolerate that? But I know that there were many of her colleagues that really did not appreciate her viewpoint because she did have to work among a lot of even conservatives. Okay? And they didn't like her background. They didn't like her standpoint of view. And they didn't like the fact that, hey, guess what? I mean, we have to admit it. She's a so-called minority now working in very conservative angles. So they were the ones who probably encouraged her, go ahead and apply for that position in the Supreme Court. Go ahead and do that. But that was maybe a reverse psychology way for them to get rid of her.
But the thing is, you can't.
I don't think they ever expected her to even go
to actually win. Yeah.
Yeah, you can't apply for most of these positions. You have to be selected or you have to run. So that's what makes it interesting.
But
so
they were the ones who, listen, they didn't think either. Again, we can make that same parallel with Barack Obama. Because remember, Obama was simply a second senator. He was a junior senator. And I believe that the reason why they let him, go ahead, go on that campaign. Go ahead and run. Oh, you want to be president? They laughed at him at first, okay? They just didn't think he was going to go that far.
Yeah, Obama got lucky. I mean, it's already 8:31.
It's a combination of luck.
Say the same for Trump.
And so, wait.
I thought he would go that far.
Not only luck, he did use the right strategy. Yeah. And I have to admit, he is a good politician.
Yeah. So I'm not talking about him winning the presidency. Yeah, I'm not talking about him winning the presidency,
Okay?
but him being, you know, a junior senator, then becoming the senior senator. There was,
I found out later on that many of the conservatives gave him a lot of support because they did not think that he was even going to go that far.
right,
Because
right.
they
But
were
anyway,
positively sure that he would never even make it to be nominated as president.
yeah.
That's why they, because you got to understand, especially for many of these conservative
Hang on,
groups.
RG. So we're running out of time. I know it sounds like you're just getting heated up now.
Well, it is a heated discussion after a while, okay?
But it's 8:32.
Yes, it is. Yeah,
So,
it is.
Now
yeah.
Barbara
All right,
responds.
everybody.